See, I had them power rated as probably the 12th or 13th best team in the SEC, so they've exceeded my expectations for them. Also, in this particular week moving against Georgia, some of what you've heard me say, and I can't really vouch for what anybody else says about anything, but some of what you've heard me say is also just simply related to the fact that I think stylistically, if I'm using that word correctly, that Tennessee presents a couple of interesting challenges for Georgia. I'm going to let you hear 2 audio clips later on in the show that explain more of that. And as I've said many times, I don't want to oversell the nature of what I think happens on Saturday. If Georgia and Tennessee played 8, 9, 10 times, 80, 90% of those games would be easy Georgia wins, much the same way you describe. But there is a confluence of events that could occur. I've talked to you before about the concept of cluster luck in baseball, where you have a couple of good things strung together in a row, and something that changes the game a little bit, especially if that happens early. Kirby Smart, I thought on Tuesday night, gave a kind of an interesting description for how it is that Tennessee sometimes gets some of these big plays on offense. It's the kind of thing you have to be ready for, I think, on Saturday. And remember this, you don't have to have 100 big plays against the Georgia defense, because you can't. You're not going to average 11 yards per play against the Georgia defense. You're just simply not going to do that. What if you have 2 big plays? I mean, here's the thing. It's like we've seen Georgia go for such a long time this year not allowing big plays against anyone. We've seen that just becomes such a commonplace occurrence that you almost forget the value of an explosive play during a game. 1 or 2 explosive plays during a game has the way of changing the way the game feels. Like I heard somebody the other day say, who was it that said this? Like 37-13 or something like that. Okay, well, let's say the game is 37-13. That game may also be 23-13 going in the fourth quarter, right? You may score 2 touchdowns to pull away, but a 10-point game in the fourth quarter is a little bit different kind of game than for the most part we've seen Georgia play this year, and that's, I guess, kind of where my mind is on this, is that we really haven't seen Georgia, for the most part, take an important fourth quarter snap since what? Clemson, probably. I mean, it seems like it's been about that long. There could be a snap or 2 taken in the fourth quarter on Saturday that have a little bit of intrigue behind them, where Georgia kind of has to make a play. Georgia really hasn't been asked to do much offensively when the game is close. Now, there's this dumb narrative out there that somehow Georgia's not good offensively. They lead the SEC in yards per play. They're like second in the league in scoring. I mean, the people twisting themselves in knots to make the case that Georgia's bad offensively are ignoring mountains of data in order to make that case. But still, it is certainly fair to say that Georgia has not been asked to do a lot offensively when a game is close. I do think it'd be very interesting on Saturday if Tennessee gets an early score and all of a sudden Georgia is asked to do some of those things. It's just kind of an interesting test for me before you go into the month of December, where the big games kind of begin there. Let's do, by the way, so we're on all the platforms. All right. So Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. Good to have all of you with us here on all the various platforms here today. Appreciate that. Let me read CDA, and then we're going to get ready to start the show. He says, former recruiter from Georgia named Marshall Malco is a real guru in recruiting and one of the first people Coach Smart hired when he came to UGA. Jimbo hired him away to acquire Kirby's system. Yeah, I mean, there is no doubt a certain Georgia flair to what A&M is doing from a recruiting standpoint. That's true. And obviously Georgia fans have noticed that. But the other thing that you notice is, and Kirby Smart's very open about this too, is that the recruiting process is kind of a systemic thing, that you have to have a system in place. And in the SEC, I mean, it just goes to show you how, crazy SEC fans are. But a lot of these support staff and recruiting, the analyst types or the people who kind of run the office operation for the recruiting machine, those people become pretty famous in SEC circles, and that's because we're football obsessives around here. But it's also because that you have to have that to be able to have the recruiting success. Think about Georgia getting all those recruits to come to the noon game against Arkansas. Obviously, the position coaches that oftentimes take the lead in recruiting, they're going to be helpful in that. But you've got to have a logistics operation to make that even take place. Now, these are, in most cases, were not official visits, so guys are on their own for their own travel. But, I mean, I'm going to joke here, but I mean this half seriously. How many wake-up calls do you think happen on a day like that? Hey, don't forget, we're going to have you here by blah, blah, blah time, 10:30 for some breakfast in the recruiting lounge. So go ahead and wake up. Hey, good morning. I mean, you got to think there's a lot of wake-up calls that go for a thing like that. How many handwritten letters? I mean, I've had people who used to be SEC coaches tell me that was the one part of the job they just could not stand. And it's the one thing that drives people out, either out of coaching all the way around or into a different kind of coaching, either trying to find their way to the NFL or going down to the high school level. That, I mean, in some cases, they're position coaches around the SEC who are writing 100 handwritten notes a week. Maybe in some cases they're writing 100 a day. That what you're being asked to do to keep the recruiting, industrial complex churning is quite robust. And A&M, both in terms of the fact they've brought in some Georgia guys, they're also just kind of copying some of the machinery that has worked for a place like Georgia and Alabama, and I think that is very true. Richard D says, and we'll start the show after this because this is a good comment, and then we'll move on. Richard says, how many games has the Tennessee quarterback played? What improvement has occurred? So this is a really weird situation for me, Richard, because I think that anybody who's watched Tennessee a lot this year will say that Hendon Hooker has been dramatically better than Joe Milton. Milton was the former Michigan transfer, Hooker the former Virginia Tech transfer. And so when Hooker has played, he has just given a dimension to this Tennessee offense that did not exist when Joe Milton was the starting quarterback. Now, that leads you to the question of, well, how come Hooker wasn't just starting from the beginning of the season? Why did they even bring Joe Milton in the program? Because they had Hooker for a while before they brought Milton into the program. Why did they even do that if Hooker is this good? And I think it's a fair question. And admittedly, this is another thing that I kind of got wrong about Tennessee. A lot of you had heard me during the offseason argue for Harrison Bailey being the best option for the Vols. And yes, I'm a Georgia fan, but I'm not trying to sabotage the program. I care about the SEC. I host SEC Country Live. I do things like that. I'm just kind of interested in the league beyond just, seeing Georgia beat up on hated rivals. I'm just kind of curious about the league. And so I'd argued for Harrison Bailey as the best option at Tennessee at quarterback, but it's clearly Hooker. I don't know, what happened for Hooker that he was so slow in emerging as the guy, but Bailey has now transferred. Seemingly that's the right thing to do, assuming that, Hooker, comes back again next year. But right now you're talking about a guy that has been very comfortable in the rapid Tennessee offensive pace, has not had a lot of turnovers, has really moved the football. Hendon Hooker's had a terrific year for Josh Heupel, and it's kind of amazing right now that Heupel's actually probably performing against expectations better at Tennessee than he ever did as the UCF head coach. And I don't overpraise it here because they still got some issues, and they could lose 40-10 at home to Georgia on Saturday. But certainly Heupel and Hooker have kind of found something together that has really, for the most part, worked here this year. So we're late starting the regular show, and I apologize for that. But we appreciate you being here as part of our First and 15. And for our Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch audiences, we're glad to have you here too. It's Terence Edwards stopping by in a few minutes. We'll talk some Georgia football with him. Obviously, we'll get into the challenge for the Georgia defense against this Tennessee offense. I think that's a very important topic to discuss here today. And obviously, we'll have to begin the show with the troubling news. And really, I'm just going to mention it. We're going to move on because I don't really even know what to say at this point in time. But obviously, there are new developments in the situation involving Adam Anderson. So we'll mention that at the top. And then we'll try to have some fun after that as Georgia gets ready for a big stretch drive here the rest of the season. So let's talk about it all as DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Merriweather and Tharp, begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Merriweather and Tharp, your source for Georgia divorce. Find them online at theatlantadivorceteam.com.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
There's no way not to make this awkward, so let me just do this, and we'll get it over with, and we'll move on after that. And listen, I certainly, it's a very serious situation, but it's one of those things that there's just very little I can say about this, very little I'd feel comfortable saying, because the facts are going to come out at a later time. But many of you are aware that charges were filed against Georgia linebacker Adam Anderson on the accusation of rape that he had been dealing with now, and that has now moved to the next phase. There are criminal charges here. Obviously, Anderson has counsel. That attorney has been pretty outspoken here over the course of the last few days. He's going to aggressively defend Anderson against this charge, and Anderson will have his day in court, and we will see what comes from that after that. It's one of those things I have to mention because it's out there, and it's a thing that's occurring. But as far as on a show like this, we're opinion based. I'm not the news. I'm not a news anchor. I'm not a reporter. I'm a guy that shares opinions about what's going on with UGA football, and any kind of opinion about this right now would be inappropriate for me because there's just so little I know about what's going on. It's clearly a very serious situation. I think it's certainly possible to have bad feelings about the entire ordeal and have a lot of just heartbrokenness about the entire thing. I just think there's really no limit to the awfulness of this entire discussion. And that's just kind of where I'm going to leave it. I truly offer sincere prayers to the entire everybody that's wrapped up in the entire situation. I hope that I guess I don't even really know what I hope. I just know that it's a very, very awful situation. Anderson's now facing this charge, and when there is more news to report, we'll probably mention it on the show. And from that, I think that you just kind of have to leave it there. But that's what Anderson's dealing with. If you want to read more about the facts of the situation, DawgNation.com's got plenty of reporting on it. You can see the statements from Anderson's attorney. You can, kind of read the specifics of the situation. But that is kind of out there, and I just at least want to make sure we mention that. And then with that, we'll kind of awkwardly transition back to what we normally do around here, which is talk about Georgia football. And obviously there is a lot to talk about. We'll turn our attention to that right now. And I think that the one thing that I keep coming back to for Georgia this season, and I've played you a lot of audio that I think backs this up, audio in particular from Georgia coach Kirby Smart. The sense that I get, and I'm always really careful to try to couch this with, hey, I'm not behind closed doors. Media gets a chance to see some practice, but honestly, I don't live in Athens. For the most part, I live inside the studio. So when the media gets to see practice, right now, I'm not even going to do that. Now, I've attended Georgia practices before, but not in a while, and I don't do that this year. I'm just not ever there and around that. So I'm on the outside looking in, like many of you are when it comes to some things of this program. But just because you're on the outside, just because you're not attending full practices each and every day, just because you're not inside those meeting rooms with the team, that doesn't mean that you don't pick up on a vibe. And I do think that we've kind of picked up on a vibe around Georgia football here this year. And that's a vibe that the sense that I get is that Georgia coach Kirby Smart is enjoying coaching this team. Now, I think that Smart's an energetic guy. I think he loves the act of coaching. So I think regardless of results, Smart's usually having a pretty good time doing his life's work. I think he views coaching as a mission, and I think he approaches each and every day with gratitude that he gets to do what he was designed to do. So I think that's not unique to Smart, but all of us have passions. All of us have things we enjoy. And there are moments when the things we enjoy, we just enjoy them even more. Something about it just feels really locked in. Something about it just feels really dialed in, that you are really right where you're supposed to be. And in the case of Smart, with the things that he said this year about the way this team practices, about the way this team prepares, about the way this team approaches each and every moment of the season, I get the sense that Georgia's having a good time. I get the sense these players are enjoying playing with each other. I get the sense that team chemistry is really high. I get the sense that Kirby Smart is enjoying all of this too, that for all of the success that Georgia's having, and there's the outside person who may say, well, they got all these 5 stars. Kirby just rolls them out there, and they just go out there and they take care of business because they have overwhelming talent. There is a sense in which this team this year is so much more than that. There's a sense, I think, where the actual talent level that Georgia has may not even be the most valuable facet of what the Dogs have employed and deployed to become the number 1 team in the country. And you may believe me when I say that, you may not. But let me give you a very prominent voice who makes a pretty similar case here. And he's going to mention a Georgia player by name in particular, but it's the overarching opinion that Kirk Herbstreit's about to share that I think the Georgia fans ought to notice. Now, it's interesting. This is from the Feinbaum Show, and Herbstreit almost sends this out as a warning to the rest of the SEC. Hey, there's something you need to know about Georgia. So he almost sends this out as a message to the rest of the SEC. But there's actually a good bit of what Herbstreit says here that I think can almost serve as a reminder for UGA fans of, hey, don't forget what has made this Georgia team so special this year. Don't overlook what Georgia truly has going for it. And Herbstreit mentions one player by name, and that's kind of cool, but it's more than just that Herbstreit says here. If you're a Georgia fan, I think you're going to like this, but I think you also should renew your consideration of this as an idea. This is Herbstreit from the Feinbaum Show this week. Take a listen.
For all SEC fans, remember this. Georgia is not just a talented team that Kirby and his staff have gone out and recruited great players. Please remember this. Georgia is Georgia this year because guys like Nakobe Dean, the hardest working players on the Georgia roster are the best players. Just like Alabama last year with Mac Jones and that group, Landon Dickerson, all those great players, Najee Harris, all those guys, Devontae Smith. They couldn't get enough of practice. They couldn't get enough of the film work. They couldn't get enough of 7-on-7 with no coaches around. That's when you have an elite team. Georgia has that this year, and you can't coach that. You just have to hope it comes together. So always remember that about Georgia in 2021. It's not just elite talent. They have that, but they have elite intangibles.
Elite intangibles, Kirk Herbstreit says. Now, I'm going to take a risk here for a moment, and I'm going to try to connect a couple dots that may not, necessarily be connected. But Herbstreit, as a color analyst, not just the host of ESPN's College Game Day, but as a color analyst, is privy to some special conversations, right? I mean, he was the color analyst that broadcast. It was the Georgia-Arkansas game. He was the color analyst for that game there that day. And, I do high school football broadcasts, and during the week I have a chance to meet with coaches, sometimes players, and, you get to know the inner workings of a program. And I can tell you, as someone who's been in the media my entire life, those extended conference calls that you do with coaches are different than the other interviews you might do. Even if you ever, publicly interview a high school coach, microphone to the face on TV, the coach is in kind of coach speak vibe. But when you talk to a coach in a conference call situation, that's not a coach speak situation for the most part. That's let me let my hair down and we'll kind of talk some football here, and we'll, it's not they reveal their deepest, darkest secrets or what's, every facet of what's going on in the program, but there is a relaxed nature of that conversation. So I'm doing that for high school football. A guy like Kirk Herbstreit's doing that for college football. And presumably before Georgia played Arkansas a couple of weeks ago, Herbstreit's talking to Kirby Smart. Now, I have no idea what that nature of that conversation was, but I have plenty of reason to believe that Herbstreit's not going to come out and say, hey, the hardest working players on this Georgia team are also the most talented. That doesn't feel like the kind of thing that Herbstreit would just make up out of thin air because, that feels like a very specific thing to say. And it feels to me like, once again, maybe I'm taking a risk here by connecting things that don't necessarily need to be connected. But don't Herbstreit's words here sound an awful like something Kirby Smart might have told him in the midst of a private conversation, one of these coaches' meetings prior to televising a game, one of these conference call type things? Doesn't that kind of feel like the kind of thing that Smart might have said, hey, hey, Kirby, what do you like about your team right now? Well, I got to tell you guys, the best thing what we have going for us right now is our most talented guys, the ones that are out there working the hardest there, too. It just sounds like something that Kirby might say. Now, our eyes would seem to back that up. A guy like Nakobe Dean, former five-star, laying it on the line each and every day. A guy like Nolan Smith, former five-star, last few weeks especially, laying it on the line each and every day. Obviously, you've heard us praise Jordan Davis over and over again. That's a future first-round pick who's absolutely buying into a team-first concept here on Georgia and really stands as a representation of all of that. That seems like the kind of thing that Kirby Smart might have said to Kirk Herbstreit at some point in time, if you had to guess, and that's Herbstreit broadcasting that message out, that no one's collected talent better than Georgia, and all of a sudden now it's a special kind of talent for the most part that also is willing to buy into a team concept. And I think this is one of those things that if you're a Georgia fan, you got to stop and appreciate this. Now, that's not the same thing as me telling you, and because of that, Georgia's a shoe-in to win the national championship. Honestly, no one knows how December and January is going to play out. Georgia's obviously the favorite to do that, but no one knows how the season is going to end. But regardless of how the end-of-season outcome is determined, the fact that Georgia has this going on right now, fun team to coach, you get the impression of. I think it's also been a fun team to watch there as well, and hopefully Georgia fans are appreciating that. Now, let me also say this really quickly, and then I'll kind of move on. There's obviously the ongoing discussion of, well, who's the right quarterback for this team? Should it be the guy who was starting at the beginning of the year? Should it be the guy that came on during the year when the previous starter got hurt? And I just think that any conversation like that has also got to happen within the context of everything else that's going on. That the vibe around Georgia is good. The chemistry is solid. Even guys like Kirk Herbstreit are going on the Paul Feinbaum show and talking about how much of that they've seen. This is how valuable all of that is for Georgia. And so on one hand, you can understand why a guy like Kirby Smart might be slow to make any kind of change, just given the fact that this team right now on the inside has the feeling of being so special. And the other hand, I think the thing you got to take from that is maybe getting wrapped up too much in some sort of intramural squabble about should it be this guy or should it be that guy. Maybe that is really missing the point. Maybe that really is taking your eye off the ball about what's really going on. That there is no one player that's going to determine Georgia's fate here this year. Georgia's too good of a team for that. And I mean that in every sense, both in terms of the talent, the success that it's enjoyed, but also the way in which the team is interwoven together. that this team is just different than that. This is not a one-man show. This is not a one-man issue. No one's going to put Georgia football on his back because Georgia football is too big to go on any one player's back. This is one of those moments where I think that Herbstreit's words are pretty wise. I think he says them to the rest of the SEC and the league and across the country. They should take notice of that. But Georgia fans themselves might could use a little reminder every now and then as well. And from that standpoint, I'm glad Herbstreit said what he said. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Meriwether and Tharp, and we're glad to have you with us no matter how. You get to us today live on video, starting at 9:45 for our First and 15 on the DawgNation homepage and the DawgNation app. Also 10 a.m. Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. And you may say, why do you start at 9:45 on the DawgNation platforms? Listen, we rolled out this new platform a few months ago, and we wanted to do a special thank you to those who helped make that launch so successful. Plus, it's just kind of fun to be on your own homepage. It's fun to be on your own app. That's something we really enjoy doing. And so we wanted to give a special thank you to those folks who tune in live on video there at DawgNation.com, the DawgNation app. That's what the First and 15 is all about. But the same show that we've been doing for years, we do on all the other video platforms there as well. We also do it on the radio at noon on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, and as a podcast on all the podcast platforms. And boy, thanks so much for continuing to make our podcast a really fun thing to deliver the on-demand audio version of our show each and every day. Really appreciate that. Of course, we would not be able to do it without our friends at Meriwether and Tharp. They're your source for Georgia divorce, and they make DawgNation Daily possible here today. And I love recommending Meriwether and Tharp. I love telling their story here on our show, because here's the thing that I believe, that in an audience the size of ours, you're talking about huge numbers of people that at some point in time may either have to consider the possibility of divorce or maybe have to confront the reality of divorce. And that can obviously be a scary and confusing thing. And around here, if I can do anything to make your life more enjoyable, if I can do anything to make your experience less scary, less confusing, if I can give you more peace, that's something I just want to do for my audience. Just something that I feel strongly about. And I mean that literally, and I mean that sincerely. And that's why I love recommending Meriwether and Tharp, because they step into a situation that some people would run away from. They step into a situation that may seem like answers are hard to come by, but when you've studied the process of divorce and how the law impacts those who might get a divorce, you develop a special level of expertise, and that's a level of expertise they want to put to work for you. It can start with a free consultation, but it continues in a relationship so much longer after that. So I truly feel that the best resource that you can turn to if you're dealing with one of the most challenging scenarios you may ever face, the idea of divorce, strong advocate on your side, smart people rolling up their sleeves, doing some hard work for you. I know that's what Meriwether and Tharp will provide. So check them out online, theatlantadivorceteam.com. That's theatlantadivorceteam.com, and find out why Meriwether and Tharp truly is your source for Georgia divorce. All right, here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Meriwether and Tharp, we're going to get Terence Edwards in just a moment, and we're going to talk to Terence about a lot with UGA, including the return of some key wide receivers last week against Missouri that a lot of Georgia fans hope to see even more of moving forward, and how that changes the scenario for the UGA offense. We will talk about that with Terence coming up here in just a little bit. Before that, though, I want to go around the doghouse. It's presented today by ServPro. And I want to dive deep here a little bit on the Tennessee offense for a moment, because I thought that Georgia coach Kirby Smart, going back to Tuesday night, did a pretty good job of describing the specific challenge of facing Tennessee. And the question I thought was a pretty good one, too, of, hey, a few times this year, more than a few times, you've seen Tennessee wide receivers against previous opponents just running wide open. I'm talking about, almost like Josh Vann against Florida. Like, there's just nobody in the camera frame whatsoever. Bunch of green grass surrounding some very open Tennessee wide receivers. Exactly how is it that Tennessee has done that with this offensive system here this year? And I thought that Kirby was good enough to kind of go into some detail about exactly what is tough about defending Tennessee, and I just think this is interesting. So here is Kirby on the challenge of the Tennessee offense and why they've had so many open receivers this year.
They're fast, and you don't always get lined up properly. I mean, it's very unique, guys. It's like you'd ask the question, how come you can't stop the triple option? Well, it's different. You don't face it every day. I mean, they got guys wide open because people have eye violations. I mean, they look at the wrong thing. Sometimes they don't even see the wide receiver. And I know that's hard to believe, but their splits are clear out on the sideline. Half of college football is playing condensed formations now, and everybody's in a teacup where everybody's right next to the ball. And now all of a sudden these guys got two guys outside the numbers And I mean, I've seen guys on tape not lined up, trying to get a call. I mean, it happens to everybody. So it's not like it's not on tape. And it worries you that it can happen to you. You know, you want to make them earn what they get. And there's a lot of plays that they've gotten on people off the bus.
So I think what Smart says there is very honest. I do. And I think if I'm Tennessee, it's worth taking some risks against Georgia. In other words, they already probably play faster than anybody. It's worth it against Georgia to try to play even faster. You may throw a pick because of it, or you may just completely bust and fizzle out yourself offensively, but you're not going to line up and beat Georgia on a per-play basis offensively. You're just not going to do that. The Georgia defense is just simply too good to do that. So it's worth trying to see if you can go so quick that you do catch Georgia lined up improperly. I think that probably happened a couple of times for Georgia against South Carolina. A couple of those big plays that Josh Vann got that day, if you go back and rewatch the film, and I'm not X's and O's breakdown guy, I don't pretend to be that, but if you go back and rewatch the film, you see a couple of instances, at least one instance in particular I can think of, where Vann probably got off on a situation where Georgia just hadn't had a chance to line up yet, and that gave him a chance to get off the ball pretty quickly. I think the same thing is worth trying for Tennessee because you're just simply not going to beat Georgia on a per-play basis. You can do that to Kentucky, and last week Tennessee averaged about 11 yards per play. You're not doing that against Georgia, but can you hit 2 or 3 big plays? And if you do, suddenly a blowout game starts to inch a little bit closer. But then there's also this. So you just heard Kirby Smart say, hey, you got basically Tennessee spread out from sea to shining sea with its wide receivers. Outside the numbers they're lining up there are spread as wide as almost anybody can be. And all of a sudden that opens up a lot of room in the middle of the field. I think the middle of the field on Saturday, where that big, ugly power T is, I think that middle of the field is going to be really interesting to watch on Saturday because, and you see this in high school football all the time there as well. High school football is always a great way to understand the basic premise of the sport because what you see happening on Fridays works its way up to Saturdays and eventually works its way onto Sundays there as well. And you see these teams that spread them out wide and then use that as an opportunity to attack soft defenses up the middle, either a running quarterback or a rushing attack. All of a sudden you've got too many bodies spread out, and all of a sudden you can't stop the run anymore. Well, this is one of the things where Georgia, you got to think, is pretty good, right? That Georgia doesn't need as many bodies in the middle of the field to stop the run. Even against a team like Tennessee that's actually had some gash plays in the rushing attack, and even Hendon Hooker himself can run a little bit. And a guy who I thought did a pretty good job of talking about this is from a show the other day on the SEC Network. Roman Harper, one of the analysts there, was discussing this a little bit, that if Kirby's right and Tennessee's going to spread you out from one sideline to the next with its wide receivers, all of a sudden what happens in the middle of the field, opening up opportunities for the run, becomes a pretty big deal. Remember Rose Bowl at the end of the 2017 season? That's what Oklahoma did so well in that first half. You got all these receivers all over everywhere. But the thing that almost knocked Georgia out of that game was Trey Sermon and Rodney Anderson, and those opportunities to run the football up the middle with a defense that was just spread from pillar to post. And so based on what Kirby Smart just said, take the chess match one step further and now look to the middle of the field for what happens next defensively. Here's Roman Harper trying to explain that point, SEC Network, earlier this week.
I'm going to be looking at the way Tennessee's offense tries to attack Georgia's defense. When they spread them out wide, when they put the wide receivers close to the sidelines, it's bringing everybody outside to the box. And now they think they have a numbers advantage on the inside, whether it's with Hendon Hooker running the ball or any one of their running backs. And what do and how they get the ball out quick to their receivers and the routes that kind of build off of that. The biggest problem that you have with Georgia when you're facing a team like Georgia is they put 4 guys in the box, and it takes 5.5 people to block those guys. Yeah. So how do you really don't have an advantage in this?
So let's keep it simple here for a moment because that's good stuff from Roman Harper. If Georgia really can win the battle in the middle of the field, offensive line versus defensive line, with what appears to be a numbers mismatch. In other words, they got fewer guys in the middle of the field, fewer defensive linemen. But if Tennessee still can't block them, or if Tennessee still can't earn some rushing yards up the middle, then obviously that's the recipe for this to become another blowout like everything else is, because suddenly that gives Georgia the freedom to either send more pass rushers or drop more guys back into coverage, that they just get a chance to play a little bit better numbers game. But if the attempt to spread Georgia out wide makes Georgia vulnerable enough where there is some room for a rushing attack, then that's also the kind of thing that allows Saturday's game to inch a little bit closer. So the overall bottom line is this is where I think your eyes should go on Saturday. Look towards the middle of the field. You see Tennessee spread out all across the place from one side of the state to the other, But look what happens to Georgia's defense when it is spread out. Guys like Jordan Davis, Devontae White, and Jalen Carter, they don't need a lot of help. If they can go and win that battle along the line of scrimmage, even though they are outmanned, at least from a number standpoint, then that could be the recipe for another easy Georgia win on Saturday. That is Around the Doghouse. It's presented today by our friends at ServPro. And listen, I'm a homeowner, and so many of you are homeowners there as well. And one thing we know is that our home is our most significant investment. I say significant for a reason, because obviously you have a huge monetary commitment to that, but you also have an emotional attachment to that too. And when there's any kind of damage to your home, that's more than just a money issue. That's the kind of thing that just makes you feel violated, right? When you see damage to your home, oftentimes it's caused by fire, water. Those are the kinds of things that can really do a number on the place that you call home, the place that you raise your children, the place that you go to for comfort. Well, ServPro steps in if that happens, because when you're dealing with that kind of damage, you just want to be able to close your eyes, snap your fingers, and say, I want this to go away. That's what ServPro does. Their restoration specialists can repair your damage, can clean everything up, and put it back literally like it never even happened. That's what they're famous for. That's what they've been doing for folks across our great state for a long time, and really all over the place there as well. Plus, each and every ServPro franchise is independently owned and operated. That matters to me, because when I trust somebody like this to come in and do important work for me, I want to know they've got some skin in the game. I want to know that their investment of time is as important to them as it is to me, and that's what ServPro provides for you. It's family-oriented, personal-oriented service, restoring your fire damage, your water damage. They can get it back for you like it never happened. So trust my friends at ServPro. It's spelled SERVPRO, servpro.com. You can reach out to them there today. All right, we appreciate you being here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Meriwether and Tharp. Busy show for us. Before we're done, we'll give you our thoughts on the other big games in the SEC and across the country here this week. We'll talk about that. Also, an interesting look at Alabama as the number 2 team in the country, what that could mean for Georgia in the chase for the college football playoff, and the debate that's starting to kind of brew around all of that. So we'll do that before we're done. But for now, a lot to talk about with Georgia getting ready for Tennessee on Saturday. Great guy to do it with is the former Georgia wide receiver, Terence Edwards, here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Meriwether and Tharp. And, of course, great to have all of you with us as well.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Always great to get a chance to talk to Terence Edwards here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Meriwether and Tharp. His insight on the Georgia Bulldogs is always so valuable. And, you know, Terence, I guess let me begin with this. You can tell me if I'm wrong, because obviously your opinion matters to me. I've been saying a few times this week, I'm a little concerned, not about Georgia losing the game on Saturday, but I also think, 11 straight weeks of blowout action. It just seems like college football is not really designed that way, that you get tested eventually, even if you're the number 1 team in the country. It sort of feels to me like Georgia might be due for a little bit of a test. I think the Tennessee offense, as Kirby Smart has correctly described a few times this week, truly is unique, and that almost no one plays faster. And, this year with, I would say, limited personnel, the Vols have had pretty good success. Certainly Hendon Hooker, I think, has proven himself to be a quality quarterback. How stiff of a challenge do you think Tennessee is for Georgia on Saturday?
Well, B, I personally think this is probably going to be the best offense that we have seen so far this year. Tennessee loves to play fast, and they love to throw the ball vertical, and they have 3 receivers that can go get the ball vertically. And they have a quarterback that is now hitting the deep pass with a high rate of accuracy. I think Joe Milton at the beginning of the season was not very accurate with the deep balls, and just going back doing my own research and looking at the stats, and I didn't know that. Hooker is 21 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and I know our defense is fantastic, and I know that this is the best defense this season. But at some point, I think Tennessee will make some plays on us. Will it lead to touchdowns? I don't know, but I'm looking forward to them making some plays. I mean, you look at the South Carolina game. Josh Vann earlier hit some deep balls against us, and that didn't lead to many points. But I look for Tennessee to move the ball a little bit more than anyone else has.
You mentioned the Hooker situation. I've heard other people say, gosh, he must not be much of a practice player if he got beat out at the beginning of the year by Joe Milton, because when they both played, it's been obvious that Hooker's been the better of the two. And I had folks tell me back in the summer that Milton was clearly winning that job during practice. And some people have been left to wonder, well, does that mean that Hendon Hooker's just not a good practice player? I mean, in your career as a player and as a coach, you may not want to mention anybody by name, and I can understand that, but Is there such a thing as just not being a good practice player and being a much better player during a game? Because, I mean, Hooker was also, I think, going to lose his job at Virginia Tech, and that's crazy for a guy that I think has shown himself to be a potential NFL quarterback with the way that he's played there at Tennessee. How come he keeps getting beaten out for jobs during practice if he's so good?
That's especially at the quarterback position. The only other person that I've ever heard about, especially at that position, was Tim Tebow. You know, he wasn't so great practice player. We all know his accuracy, but once the lights came on, he's a ball player. And I think that's you've heard that term a lot, that just not a great practice player, but once the lights turn on, he's a different animal. So maybe that's the reason. I have no clue, not being there to watch it, but you don't hear a lot of quarterbacks not practicing well and then getting an opportunity to showcase that on Saturday. So this is a unique situation that is I haven't heard about a lot.
You mentioned the Josh Vann game for South Carolina a little earlier, and I mentioned this earlier, that at least on one of those plays that he had against Georgia, it seemed like that Georgia just wasn't lined up yet. And I'm not making excuses. You got to be lined up. But it just seems like one of his big plays may have been because of that. And Kirby Smart said this week, hey, against Tennessee, that's one of the issues. They play so fast that you've got to rush the line, get lined up against them there as well. Now, when you played, teams weren't playing quite as fast as they're playing now, although Coach Rick certainly wanted to kind of put the pedal to the metal, at least in that era. He wanted to play fast. The SEC kind of changed some rules against him to prevent him from doing that. But the point here is if you are playing faster than the defense can get lined up, how much of a potential advantage is that for a wide receiver?
It is. And speaking of that, I was there with Coach Rick. We implemented the fast break, and they slowed us down. So we tried it for a few weeks, and they actually slowed us down. So Coach Rick was kind of innovative in that aspect of playing fast. And right now with the rules, it was a ploy to not allow the defense to sub. So you play fast, you keep the guys that are on the field, and you just kind of wear them out a little bit. And you could sub receivers back then without the referee holding the line of scrimmage like they do now. So there's a lot of different ways what we tried to do, but Tennessee is going to play fast, and that's a great example of the Josh Vann situation. We wasn't lined up properly. We were still trying to get the call look like, and the defense wasn't set, wasn't ready, and they hit us for a big play. So I know the Georgia coaching staff is really going to prepare them for this up-tempo, fast break type of offense. So I don't think it's going to be a big issue this week for being lined up properly, but it's something that you cannot emulate in practice. It's just something you got to see in the game and get a feel for it. And by the first quarter or so, they can really get the speed of how Tennessee is trying to play. I
don't know if you've had a chance to talk to Jermaine Burton since last Saturday's game, but I know and I'm sure you feel the same way yourself. Georgia fans were thrilled to see his return to action, Arian Smith there as well. And this is a Georgia team, Terence, that's first in the SEC in yards per play. I think they're, second in the league in points scored. They rank very high nationally. They're one of really the only, playoff contenders that's, top 5 offensive, defensive efficiency on the season. Very few other, even the top 10, Alabama has been. So it's been a good offensive performance for Georgia this year, but you have an outlook where things can get even better now because of guys like Burton and Arian Smith coming back. As I said before, as a receiver yourself and someone who knows some of these Georgia receivers so well, seeing those guys getting back healthy and in Jermaine's case in particular, making the contribution he made last Saturday, that had to be fun for you to see.
Oh, most definitely. And yes, I did speak with him. I speak with him either before the game or after the game every week. And but I was, use the term of these kids, I was on his head, though, B.A. I mean, he had an opportunity to score 3 touchdowns, and he only got in 1, so I kind of called him and like, come on, dog, you got to get in. And that first one was a great catch. I let him off the hook on that one, but the second one, he misjudged the ball and jumped when he didn't have to. And they're just getting his timing back, getting his rhythm back. And, he looks like the Jermaine that we all expected. And now he just have to stay healthy and continue to play the way we know he could play. And he's going to only help and enhance the Georgia offense.
Coaches never stop coaching, right? I mean, the coaching relationship never comes to an end, right?
Oh, most definitely. I would never be satisfied because I know his potential. So I'm always going to find something to nitpick with him on and something he could get better at, something I saw that he needs to work on. So I'm always trying to just get him to the player I know he could be.
So Kirby Smart said something kind of interesting this week that because they've been so injured at wide receiver, there's obviously a little bit of dominoes that fall because of that, including the fact that Georgia just hadn't had a ton of scout team wide receivers because they really haven't had a lot of healthy receivers to play on Saturdays. And suddenly, I guess this week, and who knows how involved they were healthy enough to be able to be, but when you've got guys like Dominic Blaylock at least making some contribution as a scout team wide receiver, a guy like George Pickens, I'm assuming in non-contact scenarios, at least making some kind of contribution as a scout team wide receiver. If you're getting ready for a team that can throw the ball, when that's your scout team wide receivers, guys who are not healthy enough to play on Saturdays, but still very talented players in their own right, I would imagine that's a pretty good luxury for a team to have, wouldn't you say?
Oh, most definitely. I mean, it kills two birds with one stone. It allows George Pickens and Dominique Blaylock to continue to rehab and get better and going against the defense that we have. And then they're also going to put pressure on those guys defensively because we know what type of receivers they are. Even if they're not at full strength, they're still tremendous football players. So it helps offensively and defensively to get those guys back and give those guys confidence that if they're making plays against this defense in practice, then they can make plays against anyone. So it's just a thrill to see, especially for Dom and George, to be able to be out there running routes and cutting at full speed.
Good stuff. Let me finish with this. I talked about Kirk Herbstreit off the top of the program and something that Herbstreit had said about Nakobe Dean, this Georgia defense, and really the entire roster overall, that right now the best players are also the hardest working players. I think you and I talked about this a little bit last week too, because Kirby Smart had said some things that kind of allude to this. I get the impression that Smart's having a good time coaching this team right now. When I hear Georgia players speak, I get the impression that they are kind of on the same page in terms of the vibe they share together. How valuable of a commodity is that when talented players are also willing to use a phrase that Nolan Smith used after the Florida game, be blue-collar guys, be, lunch pail, hard hat, hard-working type guys, not chasing glory, but willing to be a part of a team concept and share the fabric of a team together. How valuable is that for a program when you've got that going on? Herbstreit says Georgia has that right now.
Oh, most definitely. And I think probably the leader of that team, in my eyes, just from someone who looks at it from the TV, is Nakobe Dean. And I think Nakobe Dean is the heartbeat of this whole team. And when Kirby just continued to say he enjoys the way these guys study and the way he prepares for the game, it's easy for the coaches to go in there and allow Nakobe Dean and the rest of those leaders to police the locker room. They don't have to say much. When it comes from your peer, it hits a little different. And I think with Nakobe and a couple of those other defensive players, Nolan Smith, are true team leaders along with and I still think JT Daniels is a team leader. Everyone else falls in line. And when you have your hardest workers or your team leaders, it just trickles down to the rest of the team. Like, if this All-American is working just as hard, and why can't I? I want to be where he is, so I'm going to continue to work as well. So that's a luxury to have.
Really good stuff, Terence. And I joked before about coaches always coaching, but obviously that's in your blood. That's passion that you have. And just remind folks, if they want to get in touch with you, how they can be a part of the individual coaching you're providing to wide receivers and pass catchers all across the state of Georgia. How can they get more of what you're doing?
Good. Got a story for you before I give out that, BA. I was
Please.
waiting on you to talk to you today, and this is a small word. I always tell people this word is so big, but it's so small at the same time. So we had the German kid that's from California now, Hero, I think his name is.
That's right.
That was on his official visit.
Uh-huh.
If you saw a guy or an African-American guy with dreadlocks, his name is Brandon Collier. He runs the TPI recruiting out in Germany.
Yeah.
Him and I played in the Canadian Football League together for 2 to 3 years.
How about that?
And I actually one that put him on to Georgia once he was getting his business started out in Germany with the Georgia coaches and all the other coaches that I know. And I got an opportunity to speak to Hero this week because Brandon called me because he was on his official visit, and he absolutely loved the visit. So I thought that was just cool that
is really
I got
cool.
an opportunity to talk to the young man because of my relationship with one of his mentors who actually played with me 2 or 3 years in the Canadian Football
Well, there are
League.
two things about that I find fascinating. First of all, these relationships that get formed around football, your career as a player, including in the professional ranks, those are lifelong relationships, right? I mean, you'll remember those guys forever and you're staying in contact. But also the fact that, SEC football provides so many opportunities for so many folks. A lot of times we think about that for Georgians and, people like that, but now kind of stretching into Europe. And it's just really kind of amazing how football opens up so many doors, provides so many opportunities, lifelong friendships, but also friendships that then turn into playing opportunities for the next generation of player. That's a really amazing thing about the game, isn't it?
Oh, most definitely, man. You meet so many people across the scope. Especially with me being able to continue my career in the Canadian Football League for so long. And this guy here, man, I don't know, he's younger than me, and we just kind of just hooked on to each other. And now, years later, I helped him get in contact with Georgia along with other schools because he kept telling me, TE, that's what he called me, TE. We got some players over here in Germany in Europe that people don't know about, and I'm going to try to get all these kids seen. So I was just happy I was able to help to network and put him in position to see these kids out in Europe being able to come over to the States and play football and get an opportunity to play big-time football and just let people know that there are really talented football players over in Europe.
Well, let me do this real quick because I've kept you long now, and I apologize. But obviously your brother Robert's got a big run through the playoffs coming up here with a very good-looking Riverwood team. Y'all got Gunnar Stockton on Friday over at Pace Academy, too. Is Pace ready for that one?
Yeah, we got another big game. We all know what Gunnar brings to the table. This is our second time playing him this year. We kept the game close for a little while the first time, and he just took over in the second half. But, it's kind of hard to beat a team twice, but we're going to go up there and put our best foot forward and see what happens.
I like it. Terence, remind us one more time how they can get in touch with the Terence Edwards Wide Receiver Academy.
You can reach me on all forms of social media at Terence Edwards Wide Receiver Academy.
Terence, great stuff. Thanks for your time. Appreciate you being here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Meriwether and Tharp.
Thanks.
All right, good stuff there from Terence Edwards. All right, a couple things I'm going to tell you about here. First of all, as Terence said, high school football playoffs getting rolling around the state, and clearly it's going to be fun to see Terrence's team, Pace Academy, taking on Rabun County and the terrific Georgia quarterback commit Gunnar Stockton. That's fun to see, and there's big matchups all across the state, including for us on Peachtree TV and CBS46.com. On Friday night, we got the defending state champions from the 7A classification, Grayson, hosting East Coweta. East Coweta has been a power program for really my entire life of following high school football. This is a good game on Friday. 7A playoffs beginning. East Coweta and Grayson going to be a ton of fun there. So we'll see you on Peachtree TV, CBS 46 for that. Jeff Santella, part of that broadcast. Our buddy Rusty Manziel there as well. And, of course, I'll have you for the play-by-play call for Peachtree TV on Friday night. Then there's this. And maybe this is a little bit of a tease for what could also come tomorrow with maybe a former Florida commit, Julian Humphrey, maybe making the pledge to the Dogs. Well, you've got a four-star 2023 wide receiver, Raymond Cottrell, who's made his decision, and he's from Milton High School, so a big program, obviously, but Milton, Florida, not Milton in Fulton County, Georgia. He's from Milton, Florida, so understand that. But he's a four-star wide receiver. There he is on the screen saying, "I appreciate the Gator family for taking me in as one of their top 2023 recruits. But when it's all said and done, end of the day, I have to do what's best for my family, and I say go Dogs." And you never get tired of seeing recruits say that. Class of 2022, class of 2023, whatever. Good to welcome in Raymond Cottrell, a four-star 2023 receiver, into the fold here for the Dogs and that 2023 class. So big news, flipping a Florida Gator. And when recruiting season starts for Dan Mullen, once he realizes that he's lost another receiver to UGA, man, he's going to be disappointed. So a few weeks from now, when Mullen turns his attention to recruiting, man, is he going to be sad to realize that one of his receivers went to Georgia while he was trying to get bowl eligible. Boy, that's going to be really a disappointing thing for Mullen. But once recruiting season's here, you better believe Mullen's going to get back to work trying to find some replacements of whoever's left over, trying to find some replacements for the guys that he lost while he wasn't paying attention to recruiting and everybody else was. So admittedly, we enjoyed that pretty well. And obviously a big addition here for the class of 2023 for the Dogs. Taking one away from those lousy, stinking Gators is never a bad thing to do.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
All right, very, very fascinating stuff there when it comes to what is going on with Georgia and Georgia recruiting. And with that said, we'll get ready to transition here and go cruise around the SEC, courtesy of our friends at Royal Caribbean. And, boy, there are so many exciting things on the forefront here for Royal Caribbean, and I can't wait to tell you all about them. I'm talking about both in terms of special announcements I'm not supposed to make yet, but also in terms of just some of the incredible new array of ships that Royal Caribbean has hitting the seas very, very soon, and opportunities about some things we haven't ever really told you about, including the great-looking Odyssey of the Seas here. You talk about a gorgeous, gorgeous ship. Take a look at all of the entertainment options that are available for you when you are on one of these Royal Caribbean ships. I mean, how much fun does all this look for those of you watching on video, whether it be Broadway-style shows, whether it be, incredible entertainment, obviously tremendous ports of call, including a chance to go to Perfect Day Coco Cay, and all the other fun stuff that goes along with there when it comes to Odyssey of the Seas and the incredible opportunities that you get on a Royal Caribbean ship. And, of course, to take advantage of the best opportunities that are available to you, certainly we want you to be in touch with folks who are experts and know how to get this done. I'm talking about my friends at the Cruise and Vacation Authority. Nobody knows more about Royal Caribbean cruises than our friends at the Cruise and Vacation Authority. And they've got a couple of ways for you to get in touch with them. First of all, it's two former UGA alumni, current UGA alumni. I guess you never stop being a UGA alumnus once you get the degree. But the point is, folks that know UGA but also know Royal Caribbean Cruises, so you can check them out, tcava.com. That's tcava.com. Or you can give them a call, 770-952-8300. That's 770-952-8300. I realize that tens of thousands of you are listening to us right now. You're not watching. But when I watch this video of these great-looking Royal Caribbean ships, boy, it just makes me excited about planning a vacation. And the moment this season's done and the moment Georgia's hopefully hoisting up a national championship trophy, it's time to start thinking vacation. It's time to start kicking back and relaxing. For a lot of you, it's also holiday season. You love planning vacations around that time of year. Man, Odyssey of the Seas from Royal Caribbean, what an incredible ship. What a standard, really just setting a new standard for the cruise industry. That is a lot of fun. And as we cruise around the SEC, courtesy of our friends at Royal Caribbean, here are a couple of stories I want to hit with you here for today, including an interesting statement from Heather Dinich. Now, a lot of you know who Heather is. Reporter for ESPN, her beat in particular is the college football playoff. And the thing that Heather that's what she does, and that's what she talks about. That's all she covers. And so she was on Get Up, the morning show on ESPN recently, and she was asked the question about Alabama being number 2. That could Alabama, as a number 2 team in the country, still make the college football playoff as a 2-loss team? If Alabama were to win the SEC West, they have to win out in conference play to be able to do that. But if they win the SEC West, if they go to the SEC championship, lose close to Georgia, could Bama still make the playoff as a 2-loss team? She said yes. I believe that Heather's take on this is correct. And I believe that and we've said this before, that there are a few people out there that seemingly have a little bit of a misperception about the fact that somehow the season's going to end for Alabama if it loses in the SEC championship. I simply don't think that's the case. I think there is a reason that Alabama is at number 2. It's not just a placeholder right now, even though the current iteration of the playoff top 25 doesn't matter very much, that there is still something to be taken from Alabama being where it is, and that's a team that's going to get extra consideration for a playoff spot, even if they lose the SEC championship game. Now, I will also say this, that it's not a given that Alabama wins the SEC West. If Alabama were to get upset by Auburn at the end of the season here, that will actually open the door for Texas A&M to win the SEC West, assuming it continues to win games and wins out there. And so much the same way I believe that Alabama could make the playoff as a 2-loss team if Georgia beats it. What if A&M gets the college football playoff, and let's say they pull the upset against UGA? Now, I wouldn't predict that to happen, but also it wouldn't be the craziest upset of all time if Georgia, after running through the regular season 12-0, were to stumble in a game, 13th game against Texas A&M. A lot of folks believe that even if Georgia were to lose that game in some sort of unforeseen circumstance, Georgia should still go to the college football playoff. But what would happen to Texas A&M in that situation? I believe, much the same way that a 2-loss Alabama team correctly is being considered a playoff contender, I think that A&M as a 2-loss, in that case, SEC champion, I think they're still part of the conversation there as well. The point here is this. I am not 100% sure that Georgia's a shoo-in if it loses the SEC championship game. I think the way to avoid that topic is to simply not lose and take the decision out of the committee's hand. But I believe that there are more than 2 SEC teams who are still in contention for the college football playoff. Clearly, Alabama's won. Even if Bama loses to Georgia, I believe they remain a playoff contender. And assuming that the dominoes were to fall correctly for Texas A&M, I believe it's also still a college football playoff contender as well. They sit at 11th right now in the playoff rankings, and I don't think you're hearing enough being said about the Texas A&M Aggies right now. By the way, speaking of playoff chatter, we're going to start something brand new here at UGA called or I should say here at DawgNation, called our Chase for the Championship. It's going to involve UGA and some of the other playoff contending teams. It's Chase for the Championship. It's a brand new show that's going to debut here today on the DawgNation video channels, and it's going to lead us up to the big game in Atlanta come December. Also, it's going to lead us into a big event that we're going to have previewing that game coming up there as well, going back to Marlowe's Tavern again. So Marlowe's Tavern, Kroger, going to bring Chase to the Championship for you. Big event at a local Marlowe's Tavern. Big event the day of the SEC Championship there in Atlanta, and a weekly show looking at the college football playoff rankings with me. Happy to welcome in John Stinchcomb for that. We're going to break down exactly where Georgia stands, obviously at number one, but all the other teams that are kind of in line with Georgia competing for the national championship, or as we're saying around here, the chase for the championship. You get what I did there? So that starts today. It rolls through the rest of this month. It culminates at a Marlowe's Tavern with a big fun event that I'll be telling you all about. And, of course, the day of the SEC Championship, big fun stuff going on with that there as well. So tune into the DawgNation video channels. We're going to have a lot more for you on that today. Cannot wait to be able to do that. A couple other stories. I'm going to do this quick. I mentioned this to our video audience before, but keep your eye on Texas A&M right now when it comes to recruiting. They won the recruiting battle for the five-star defensive lineman Walter Nolan the other day. That's not something we've talked about much on this show, but it is a very big deal. I think it ends, obviously, any pursuit for A&M for Bear Alexander. But beyond that, I think it speaks to what the Aggies are currently doing right now. There's some perceived momentum also for Texas A&M when it comes to five-star wide receiver Evan Stewart, Shamar Stewart. Some of the big names of this 2022 class, guys you've heard us mention on the show, seem to have a growing connection to Texas A&M at the moment. So it's worth paying attention to the Aggies' current recruiting momentum. It seems to exist. And you know, if you want to go back to something we talked about in SEC Country Live again yesterday, the idea that LSU is not going to give up in its pursuit of Jimbo Fisher, I think you're left to say, well, if there was really a chance that Jimbo was leaving A&M for LSU, would they have as much current recruiting momentum as they do, knowing that recruits might sniff that out and might be looking elsewhere if there was going to be a changeover in the program, and just on the idea that why would you leave a program that's recruiting as well as A&M currently is? So a lot to pay attention to there on that. And then I don't have time to get into this as much as I want to, so let me just kind of say this here quickly here for a moment, that it certainly seems like that even with the firing of Todd Grantham and John Hevesy, the offensive line coach from Florida, Grantham, of course, the defensive coordinator, it doesn't seem like that's fully quieted down the narrative around Dan Mullen that he needs some things to go right for him before this season's done. Remember, Florida is still playing to get bowl eligible. Now, they got an easy game on Saturday, no problem. But with Florida State at the end of the season, I think Missouri is the other SEC opponent we still haven't seen Florida play. Boy, I don't quite believe that Mullen could afford another trip up there. I don't quite believe that Mullen could afford another loss after the embarrassing one to South Carolina this past weekend. So we'll do more on this when we have time to. For now, we'll make that your SEC through. And let me also do this really quick because I know that so many people right now are talking about how they can get involved in the job market and get a rewarding career. And that's where my friends, and this truly is my friends because this is a part of our parent company here there as well. The company we work for is called Cox, and they've got an incredible opportunity for you out there right now, potentially, certainly. All kinds of great career opportunities I want to make sure that you're aware of, because if you're a web developer with a knack for fantasy football or a data geek who knows about all the best brew pubs in Athens, or an auto technician that wants to take a big step forward there as well, Cox Enterprises got a lot to offer for you right now. You can discover countless career paths all across the spectrum of opportunities. So many different ways for you to get involved here, whether it be through engineering and technology, network security infrastructure, human resources, sales and supply chain, obviously a very important thing right now, automotive repair. There's an entire automotive division of our company that you may not even be aware of that do some really amazing things. And they're terrific job opportunities for car lovers, people like that. What an amazing job opportunity that is. And really, that's just the start of all that's out there for you. So I want you to check out more online here. It's coxcareersatl.com. That's the website, coxcareersatl.com. ATL.com. Of course, COX, CoxCareersATL.com. You can find out more about that and can really take a step towards what can be a rewarding career. I can tell you for me, I don't talk much about my job life around here. I just do the show, but I am very thankful. I mean, when you see the way in which they've supported us, giving us a great studio to do this show each and every day, allowing us to cover Georgia football the way we do here at DawgNation, that's just the kind of cool place that Cox is to work. So I can't recommend them highly enough, and I would encourage you to come be my colleague. Work with me here, CoxCareersATL.com, for more on that. All right. So let's finish up with this. Big games around college football here this weekend. Our thoughts quickly on those games. I'll obviously expound more on my feelings on this on Go With The Flow coming up on Friday, the DawgNation video channels. But let me roll through these quickly. This is the largest slate of games that we've picked here this year because you've got a number of SEC versus SEC type games going on. And you've also got 3 different conferences providing top 25 slates for us here. I've told you before, I think that Tennessee can keep it inside the 20 against Georgia. I expect that to happen. Mississippi State against Auburn, I think, is an interesting game. First of all, Mississippi State's probably been better on the road than you realize. They've covered 3 straight in SEC play there, and have covered 5 of their last 6 on the road. But Auburn, of course, is a very different team at home. They've covered 12 of their last 14 when favored against the spread here. So I'll take Auburn minus the 5.5 there. South Carolina goes on the road against Missouri. You heard me last week. I love the Gamecocks against Florida. But if you want to be a good gambler, you've got to be willing to stick and move. I stuck with Gamecocks a week ago, but I am moving right now. Missouri at home covered the spread for the first time a week ago this season when they kept it inside the 40-point number against Georgia. They're actually a 1-point favorite against South Carolina. BetUS is telling you all you need to know right there, that the Gamecocks could be due for a letdown going on the road a week after a big stand at home against Florida. So I'll take Missouri there in that spot. I like A&M on the road at Ole Miss. This is an A&M team that I think is turning the corner here. They've covered 6 of their last 8 in SEC play. They've also covered 4 straight against the spread there as well. So on the road as a 2.5-point favorite, I think that's no problem. I'll take Kentucky minus the 21 at Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt's not an automatic go against for me. Sometimes they will occasionally stand up on the road, almost never at home. Did cover in their last SEC home game against Missouri, but that's the outlier here. They're usually pretty terrible at home when you expect them to be. I expect them to be, and so I'll take Kentucky there in that spot. Arkansas against LSU. LSU's a 2.5-point home underdog. We have not seen LSU as an underdog at home in recent years as much as we've seen that be true this year. That's all you need to know about why they're moving on from Ed Orgeron. Eventually, I think LSU's got to quit. Admittedly, they have not laid down and died yet. Not against Alabama last week, not against Florida earlier than that. They've shown a good bit of fight for a coaching staff that's looking for a new job. Arkansas did eke out a win last week against Mississippi State. Did not cover, though. They're in the top 25, though, with the College Football Playoff Committee right now. I expect them to go on the road and win this game. Oklahoma's at Baylor. Baylor's a 5.5-point home underdog. Oklahoma's not been great against the spread this year, just 4-5 against the number this year. Also failing to cover in its last 2 true road games, both those games played in the Sunflower State against Kansas and Kansas State. That said, I'll still take Oklahoma here. They've had the week off. They know what's at stake for them there on the banks of the Brazos River, and I will trust the Sooners to get that done. Michigan's at Penn State. I think that Penn State may be one of the most undervalued teams in the country right now. I think it's a shock they weren't in the College Football Playoff top 25 this week. They have 2 wins against teams ranked in the top 20, Auburn, Wisconsin. The loss that holds them back is the loss to Illinois, but the fact of the matter is Illinois is actually settled in 4-6 right now. That's not an embarrassing loss necessarily. They've also dealt with injuries, quarterback in particular. I think they're undervalued against Michigan here in this spot. I'll take the Nittany Lions to win the game. Ohio State's minus 20 against Purdue. People have jokingly started to call Purdue the spoiler makers. No team in the history of college football, I'm not about no program, has more wins against top 5 opponents while unranked than Purdue, but the Boilermakers are no longer unranked. 20 is a lot of points here. I'll take a little bit of a flyer against Ohio State, but admittedly, Nebraska last week, previous week against Penn State, Ohio State has not looked the part of a national champion as of late. And then finally, I think the wrong team is favored, NC State versus Wake Forest. I like Dave Doran's Wolfpack here on the road. Wake Forest still unbeaten in conference play, even though they lost to North Carolina a week ago because of a scheduling anomaly. But in this particular case, NC State just plays more defense. Wake's a fun team to watch, but I actually don't believe they're better than NC State. So I'll take NC State on the road here plus the 2 there. And those are our BetUS best bets. And, of course, your opinions on the games may be better than mine. You may be better at picking games than I am. Of course, so far the kid's not doing so bad with his picks this year. So if you are ready to make some money on your college football knowledge, my friends at BetUS, the ones to turn to for that. You go to BetUS.com and use the promo code DN125. The reason why you want to use that promo code is because when you use that, you're going to get a 125% sign-up bonus. That means you're going to put money in your account, and BetUS is going to put more money in your account than you do when you get signed up there. So BetUS.com, the promo code DN125, you get a 125% sign-up bonus. You're a winner before you even place your first bet. It's one of the reasons why BetUS has lasted so long. More than 25 years, they've been America's most beloved sportsbook. You don't last that long unless you're taking great care of your players. BetUS is going to take great care of you, including when you sign up with the big 125% initial deposit bonus. But you got to use the promo code DN125 to take advantage of that today. All right, as we get ready to wrap up here today, we'll do so with our golden shoe. And, of course, appreciate those that always submit great stuff on that. Tomorrow we'll probably do another one of those Friday shoes dumps where we get a few of them out there that have kind of matriculated in over the course of the last few days. Always so enjoyable, everybody sending those in. And today we'll give a shout-out here for a Tennessee-themed one. Very funny from our buddy Fishing with Tiny Bass, who shares you a little bit of a Georgia-Tennessee play. Obviously, folks continue to make fun of Tennessee for the thrown mustard bottle during the game against Ole Miss a couple of weeks ago. And so that's what Tiny Basson writes in to say, here's a little edit I made for this week's matchup, Dogs versus Vols, hashtag JD at NYC. A little golden shoe submission for our buddy Tiny Bass, and it works out well. You see Georgia's the ketchup bottle, Tennessee is the mustard bottle. Pretty good stuff there from our buddy Fishing with Tiny Bass all the way around. Also, Gator haters, don't forget, we're already thinking about next year's cocktail party 352 days from right now. We will see you tomorrow, DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. Have a great day. Talk to you then, everybody. And on video, time now for our R.S. Andrews cool down, air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric. R.S. Andrews, the one you turn to for all of that. And as I said before, you can also see him tomorrow for Go With the Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews. Our picks for the big games for the upcoming weekend. Expanded thoughts on how all of that plays out. We will do that then. All right. We're going to be quick with comments today, and I apologize. We just got so much going on around here, including later on this afternoon, the start of Chase for the championship. Very, very fun. A big look at the college football playoff rankings leading up to a great event at Marlowe's Tavern and a terrific event before the SEC championship. And I'm going to be giving all those details to come here. So that's going to be great, great stuff. All right, let's do this. Over here on the Facebook side of things, we'll take a few comments, then on YouTube, and then we're out for today. And heading towards Knoxville and already getting my layers, trying to start thinking about packing here a little bit. You know, you get the undershirt, you get the thermal shirt, you got the shirt that goes over top of that, you get the pullover that goes on top of that, you get the jacket that goes on top of that. It's an enclosed press box, so you don't need all that during the game. But down there for the post-game show and everything else, you probably will need some of that. All right, let's see what else. Van West coming down from Virginia for the Tech game. Yeah, Van, I hope I get a chance to see you there for that too. That'd be great. I would love to be able to do that. Brandon Griffin wants to see Carson Beck, Brock Vandegrift get a chance against Charleston Southern next week. Yeah, that'd be great. I'd love to get a chance to see them play. Nick Roundtree with a big opinion. He says Tennessee won't hold the Dogs under 50 points. So strong take there from Nick Roundtree. Xavier Cottle says, how are the Gator tears after that flip? Yeah, I imagine they're flowing, and they're sweet as wine, I'm guessing. Matt Rukavina says, let's get the Red Coat Band to play home for the holidays for Tennessee after our game on Saturday. Yeah, that would certainly be funny. Shelton Tucker says, why am I against Stetson Bennett? Who thinks I'm against Stetson? Here's the thing, and, you know, look, I had this on the comment section of the podcast yesterday too, and somebody's like, you know, I feel like I have over and over again kind of expressed my thought that the way in which fans are at each other's throat about the quarterback situation is a little bit silly, just given what Kirby Smart's saying to you about the team. And that I feel like I've made my point that's pretty clear. This is one of the reasons why I repeat myself so much, because even when I repeat myself 100 times, you still got people like Shelton Tucker who somehow interpret me to be against Stetson Bennett. I don't think I'm against anybody. I have said before that I think that JT Daniels may be the better of the two quarterbacks, but I also have said that I absolutely believe this is Kirby Smart's decision to make, and I'm the one that's always touting the fact that the Georgia offense is way better than a bunch of knucklehead simps seem to think it is. So I really don't know what else I can do, and I have no problem with people getting in here and arguing with me about things that I've said. But the place I'm going to draw the line is when people try to argue with me for things that I haven't said. That's where I'm going to kind of get that going on this. Mike Timoney says, I try not to comment on this situation at all, but the one thing, let me read this, I can't wrap my mind around is, that's the Anderson thing, I don't know. I thought you were talking about quarterbacks. The Anderson thing, I just don't know what to say about it. I don't know. And when you don't know, you should probably just keep your mouth shut. And so that's just what I'm going to do. And I just hate it. I hate it all the way around. I started the show by mentioning it. But beyond that, I don't really know what else I can offer other than this is the fact. It is out there. He's facing a charge. He's going to defend himself against the charge. And you just got to leave it at that. And I don't know what else to say. I really don't. Going back to the other topic, Keith Fold says, just because one believes JT's the better quarterback doesn't mean that you're against Stetson Bennett. And that's exactly true. Because, I feel like I have defended Bennett over and over again when I felt like he has faced some excessively harsh criticism and, frankly, some unfair cheap shots. I think some of the stuff against Bennett kind of veers into unfair cheap shot territory, and I've certainly stood up to defend him there on that. But the one thing I've also said, too, is even though that my hunch, my intuition is that Daniels is probably the better of the two players. After all, that's what Georgia thought at the beginning of the season, too. So it's not just me that has thought that. Georgia thought that there as well. The one thing I keep saying over and over again is that if you want facts, actual data to back up the assumption that you have that Daniels is the better of the two players, it's actually pretty hard to find that. You don't really see a lot of statistical data to point to, well, this is obviously why JT Daniels is the better of the two. You're left to make the assumption on, well, there must have been a reason why Daniels was chosen as the starter to begin with. And I think that's a reasonable thing to conclude. But I think it's also reasonable to conclude that there must be a reason why Kirby Smart, Todd Monken are doing what they're doing right now. And I'm just kind of fine with that. When I hear Kirk Herbstreit say what he said at the top of our program today, y'all, I do take that pretty seriously. I do take that assessment of the situation to mean something. That right now there is what did Herbstreit say, elite intangible? If I've got elite intangibles, I'm speaking as if I'm Kirby Smart. If I've got elite intangibles, I'm not doing anything to mess with that. I'm not doing anything to mess with that. I am riding that as long as it can be ridden. And if something were to happen to it later on, then you make a different decision at that time. But if intangibles can be elite, and if Georgia truly has them, or it, I said it or them, either way, if Georgia actually has elite intangibles, then you don't mess with that. You just go as long as it'll take you, I think. Let's go over to YouTube for a moment. And we'll get ready to get out of here. On YouTube, I hadn't pulled up the YouTube comment yet. On YouTube, Robert Barnes says, I can't quit talking about the quarterbacks. See, this is the other thing, too, and I think Robert's joking, but, the idea that somehow this is a media-created phenomenon when you look at the comments compared to my own comments during the show. I don't believe I mentioned quarterback during the show today, but still, even if I don't, 60-70% of the comments from fans themselves are going to be about the quarterbacks. So that's the other thing that I do push back a little bit on is this idea, the media just wants a quarterback controversy. Actually, the media kind of doesn't. The media seems to be fine with, covering Georgia as it actually exists on the field, at least most of the media. They're going to be, people with an agenda. There always will be. But generally speaking, the media by and large is content just to cover what's going on with the UGA. But it's the fans themselves that seem really, really eager to kind of create something, something else there. Tennille Calvino, thanks for the kind words about the hoodie here. Yeah, I'm kind of in that sort of sweatshirt season. I have a bunch of these sweatshirts that they just kind of pile up in the closet, and I love to put these things on. It's always fun. Frank Patterson says he and Jay Shipes want to send in our resume. So I am not personally hiring because they don't let me make hiring and firing decisions, but Cox Enterprises is certainly hiring, and so you can check out that, and maybe we can be colleagues. Fisherman Tiny Bassin over here on the YouTube page. Yeah, congratulations. Very, very funny stuff. Good job today. SEC Dog says, do you think we hold Tennessee under 13 points? I kind of don't. I could see Tennessee exceeding that number on Saturday. I could. Mitch Davis says, and I'm assuming this is not the former Georgia linebacker from the 1990s. He says, I agree with you, B.A. At the helm, the offense is potent. But if Stetson is the guy, then we all have to live with it. Yeah, I mean, as we're on the kind of the same page about this, Mitch, in that when you look at the overall statistical performance for Georgia, this is quite a potent offense, heading towards being the most potent offense of the Kirby Smart era. That's not an insignificant thing to be able to say. That's kind of what Georgia has going for it right now. That's the kind of thing that I think matters a little bit in a situation like this. And, you know, if Smart really is going to make what is a little bit of an unorthodox decision, if you were to have a guy like Daniels at the beginning of the year, and if you were to turn your attention to Bennett now, and if you stay with Bennett, that's a little bit of a unusual choice. It seems different than what some might expect a coach to make there in that spot. Just given the success that Kirby Smart has enjoyed, given the competitive fire that I think most of us believe that Kirby Smart has, certainly you'd have no reason to believe that he's trying to sabotage his own team, nor do you believe that he's making a decision like this lightly. I think the only logical conclusion is there must be a reason this is taking place, and that something that's invisible for us must be visible for him. Something that seems difficult to define for us would appear to be quite tangible for him, and he may or may not ever tell us what that is. Thomas T-Bone says, okay, what is my prediction then for Georgia, Tennessee? How about 31-21? Does that sound good? 31-21? Something like that. That's about what I'm thinking. Center Point Media says this defense is shown to limit teams below 7 points per game. Yeah, they've been amazing. This is not about doubting the Georgia defense. This is about understanding the nature of the way that football is. That it's worth it to Tennessee to try to be as aggressive as it can possibly be. It's worth it to Tennessee to try to take as many chances as you can possibly can. You know, think about poker. Go all in, center of the table as much as you possibly can, and just try to hope you get them, you know, lined up improperly. Take the deep shot down the field and see if you can strike with the big play and see if you can put pressure on Georgia that way. It's worth it to take those shots on Saturday. Most of the teams that Georgia's played have been unable to do that. They just simply can't block long enough to do that. But if Tennessee's playing fast enough, can they create that opportunity? Flex Dog asking about how the Anderson situation impacts the football team. You know, I think that's a fair question to ask, and obviously you're taking a talented player off the team with Anderson not playing. That's certainly true, and I think there are two things that are going to be going on here. I think you're replacing an outside linebacker, and it seems like in some cases a guy like Robert Beal is going to be one that gets a chance to do a lot of that. But also you're replacing the productivity of Anderson, and that's not necessarily the same thing. In other words, so who gets the sacks that Anderson would have maybe had a chance to get? I think you're going to ask more of Nolan Smith there in that category. I think you're going to ask more of Trayvon Walker in that category. Very quietly, Trayvon Walker suddenly starting to play. I shouldn't even say suddenly because I don't have any indication that he wasn't playing well before, but he's starting to have his name called as frequently as I assumed it probably would here this year. That I wouldn't be surprised if Walker's not getting more sacks the rest of the way. That the answer of, well, who's playing outside linebacker, in a lot of cases that's going to be Robert Beal, and I guess in some cases it's going to be MJ Sherman. But who's going to get the productivity that would have maybe gone the way of Anderson? That's a Nolan. That's a Trayvon Walker. Not that Walker's going to be playing outside linebacker, but that he's going to get a chance to rush the passer as an outside linebacker maybe would. And just at face value, it's obviously true that not having Anderson on the field that's not the scenario we'd certainly choose, but it also doesn't have to be the kind of thing that debilitates you either. You know, national championship odds aren't going to move one iota on the absence of Anderson. It's just another challenge to overcome. And here's the thing about football, and this is sometimes good, maybe sometimes it's not. Teams move on fast. You get hurt, teams aren't static. If you're injured and on the sideline, the team is going to move while you're not there, and they're going to move in a direction. And when you step out and try to step back in, sometimes getting back on that spinning wheel is not always the easiest thing to do. And the same thing when a guy is taken off the field for a different reason. For better or for worse, there's just too much going on that you just turn the page to the next thing. Think about George Pickens for a moment. Think about how big of an injury that was when Pickens got hurt in spring practice. Yet by the time August got here, we weren't even really talking about Pickens anymore. And that's not because I'm not a fan of his. I'm a huge fan of George Pickens. But eventually there's just a need for teams to just kind of move on. And in this particular case, at least in terms of its on-field personality, Georgia will move on from this pretty quick too. Jermaine King kind of agrees with me on the 31-21. He also says that I was right about Missouri. Yeah, I mean, I did take Missouri plus the points last week. 40 is just way too much. I think we picked it at 38. That's still just way too many points. In this particular case, I just sort of have that kind of hunch for Saturday there as well. And if it does, let's say that Georgia does win 31-21. You're going to have some people, panicked. Like, we will not be panicked on Monday if it's a 31-21 game. It just happens. You don't beat everybody by 100 points. So hear me now that if the game plays out the way I expect it to, still relatively close in the fourth quarter, Georgia having to make some plays to win, get a stop or score a touchdown in order to preserve a victory, that's not going to be the kind of thing that we gnash teeth over on Monday. We're not going to be panicked about that. I think that Georgia is still on schedule to be exactly where it wants to be, even if it plays a game closer than the experts think against Tennessee. Sometimes that's just the way the college football goes. And with that said, we got to roll for now. Thanks for being here for our R.S. Andrews Cool Down. Of course, R.S. Andrews is the one you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. That is what you can trust R.S. Andrews to do for you today. So find them online, rsandrews.com, for a lot more on that. Also, make sure to check out the Atlanta Journal-Constitution at ajc.com for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. AJC's got you on all of, R.S. Andrews does your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution gets you up to date. By the end of the show, my mind's just in 1,000 different places. But the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, the one you turn to for everything you need to know about what's going on in Atlanta. Obviously, a lot of this related to the world of sports. Did you know, I found this out yesterday, I didn't realize this, that if the season ended today, first of all, it's not going to, but did you know the Falcons have a wild card spot if the season ended today? I was a little bit surprised about that. So you can get more of the football weekend coming up. Also, if you want more details on the facts and the Anderson situation, you can get that at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. How weird is it the Braves are the World Series champions, but yet when it comes to individual awards, Manager of the Year, MVP, things like that, Braves really nowhere to be found. A little bit of a breakdown of that at the AJC. Plus, also a great look at Veterans Day. And obviously that's such an important day in the calendar. I know that for me, I'm so proud of my family's connection to the armed services. I'm not a veteran, but my dad was, served in Vietnam. Both my grandfathers were. One grandfather was a Korean War veteran, World War II era vet. For my other grandfather, just really, really proud of that lineage in my life and thankful for all those who serve our country, both actively and historically, for the safety you provided for us. And obviously we are very, very proud of that. And one of the things I always take such great comfort in is knowing that so many folks who are overseas have used DawgNation's way of connecting with family and listening to the show to kind of stay close to what's going on back home. So I really, really appreciate that. So thanks to all of our veterans for their support. And most of all, thank you for supporting our country and serving our country. And of course, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution takes a closer look at Veterans Day here today. And so you can check that out, ajc.com. Thanks for being here for R.S. Andrews Cool Down, DawgNation Daily, presented by Meriwether and Tharp. Hope you have a great day. We'll look forward to seeing you here again tomorrow.